All right, Ray. So check this out. The auto market right now is having some problems. We've seen it from GM's earnings and we've seen it from Stellantis's earnings now. So GM's net income falls 35%, and this is due to tariffs. And we're seeing something similar, a big hit coming from Stellantis. I would assume we'll hear a lot of the same kind of story coming from Ford. And this is all at a time right now where we're seeing even more weakness in the market. So let's go through GM first and see kind of the warning signs that a lot of these auto manufacturers are really sending up, these flags that we're seeing right now. Big problems coming forward.
Well, it appears as if if your net income is down 35%, and you've had to eat $1.1 billion in the quarter due to absorbing the cost of the new tariffs, that typically doesn't bode well for an organization. And before we went on the air, you had just pulled up GM's stock, and apparently their stockholders are not thrilled with the information that came out today. As we can see, it's down 3.5% for the day.
It's down 6.5% today.
Oh, excuse me, just 6.5%. So, even though GM news is positive in comparison to Stellantis, because GM is still showing being profitable, it still does not bode well for investors and stakeholders in the company to see GM have to eat $1.1 billion in tariff costs in the quarter. I just, my question is, how long can they afford to do it? And even if they could afford to do it, will their stockholders allow them to continue to do it?
And my thing is, so they're planning. The plan is for them to eat this money, right, and not pass it on to their consumers. We already have truck prices that are through the roof anyway.
Yes.
Do you feel like you're going to see a lot of these other manufacturers have that same kind of message? Because if GM's doing it, well, then okay, Ford, if they're going to increase their prices like they've already said that they're doing with your Mavericks, I know some Mach-E's, I don't know how they can raise prices on those, but they're raising prices. Some of the Bronco Sports that they're increasing the prices. When you have a company like GM, which is their top competitor is Ford. Ford's top competitor is GM.
Mm-hmm.
When you have that coming through as your message from GM, do you think that these other brands, maybe it's kind of a race to the bottom, but not really the bottom, a race to not charge our customers for tariffs? Do you feel like Ford is going to have a similar message when they come out?
I think there's only so much they can afford to eat before they can no longer do it. I would imagine that Ford looks at this and says, why couldn't GM say we're going to raise prices to a degree because it'll help everybody out? But Ford, I don't know that Ford's in the same financial position as GM is. When you look at that article, GM's net profit dropped from, I think it was a little over 10% to a little over 6%. So you have a 4% drop in your net profit percentage. They really want to be operating at a 10% net profit, not a 6% net profit. And how many how many of these manufacturers can afford to do that? And the question still becomes, and for how long? The last time I checked, you correct me if I'm wrong, because you don't know this about me, but I don't have any money in the stock market because I guess I do. I have some annuities, but I don't personally invest in the stock market because I just think it's like legalized gambling. So how long before there's pressure from your stockholders that say, no, we want to get back to our 10% net profit so that we can get a greater return on our investment? how long before those stockholders say, that's what we want to see? We don't care about anything else at the moment. You're cutting away at the profit of the company.
So they're saying that today. We can see it with this. Yeah, 6.5% down, 6.3% right now. That's the shareholders are absolutely reacting to the news that they just saw today. But I mean, here's the thing. In my opinion, things will get worse as we go throughout the rest of this year. Tariffs, we know, aren't going anywhere. And at this point, we know that if prices increase, if they try to tack on some of these extra costs, we already are seeing weakness in the market. We're already having dealers that are starting to turn down allocations, and they have been for some time now. And it's I mean, there's a lot of these manufacturers, especially the big three, are getting hit on two fronts right now, where you have vehicles that are too expensive for the consumers that are trying to buy right now.
Yes.
You have uncertainty in the market, which makes people who do have money, they are more aware of economic things that are going on in the system, more aware of the news, more aware of what's going on with their money, and with the uncertainty that's in the system, well, that causes them to hold on to their money more. And so your top end earners that are buying the high-end Jeeps, that are buying the Lariats, they're buying the high-end trucks, the $90,000, $100,000 trucks. Those buyers are going to be less willing to spend that kind of money right now in this environment. I know the stock market's at all-time highs right now, but it doesn't take out the fact that there's so much uncertainty in the market. There's a saying in the stock market that you can climb the wall of worry. So the stock market can continue to go up, but people can still be scared with their money. And until we see things like Target, like Walmart, like them starting to get hit, where you see consumers just stop spending money, well, the stock market's probably going to keep chugging along, even though these top end purchases like expensive houses, like expensive vehicles, those purchases can be on halt, even though the economy and the stock market can keep chugging along. So I feel like even though we're seeing all-time highs at a lot of these stock prices, you're not going to see it in the manufacturers, because these manufacturers are going to start to get hit as uncertainty continues to persist throughout the market.
It seems to me, if I just heard you correctly, you're saying people that have the income to be able to buy things are being more conservative with how they're spending their money when they sense a certain amount of uncertainty about what's going on. And I think that makes perfect sense. And, if you dig a little deeper into what GM did, they absorbed the bulk, if not all of, the costs of the tariff. They also reduced, as a percentage of the transaction price, the incentive spend in order to sell cars. And I suppose the reason, and their incentive spend as a percentage of sales is 2% lower than what the industry average is, okay, which is pretty significant. And my supposition is that the reason they could do it that way is because, well, they ate it all up front because they were eating the tariffs. You can't eat the tariffs and increase your incentive spend. It is pretty much a one or the other. You can eat the tariff and decrease your incentive spend, or you can pass along the tariff and increase your incentive spend to offset the price increase. Either way, it's about the same outcome. And so it just becomes a question of how long are they going to be willing to do it? And I think if the shareholders are saying today, hey, we don't like this, I think that the point will get across that I know Ford stock is down. They're all down. All the manufacturers are down because everybody recognizes that they are struggling to maintain their profit margins, and their profit margins are declining. And in many cases, some of these brands, their market share is declining because they have fewer people to sell cars to. It's
So I've got a question for you. You ran stores.
yes.
How important was it to you actually in the store trying to move metal? How important was the incentive spend that was coming from the manufacturers?
Well, it was very important. It's what allowed it. It was part of what allowed us to offer a larger discount, or what appeared to be. I mean, let's face it. It's all about perception, and what I mean by that is the perception is. With the increased incentive spend and the motivation of the dealership, we can create the perception that there's a much larger discount to be had, that the ultimate cost is much lower than what the initial asking price is. And so the incentive spend, whether it was subsidized interest rates for loans, or subsidized rates for leasing, or strictly cash back to the customer, those things were all important in helping us move the metal. Um, every dealership relies on them heavily. It's, we all understand that there isn't a new vehicle out there that isn't overpriced as far as the MSRP is concerned. And and I guess realistically, we've known that for like forever, because for like forever, dealers have been discounting the price of the vehicles in order to sell them, and manufacturers have been offering rebates and other incentives to help sell them. So it's as if everybody understands that the initial asking price is way higher than it should be. So yeah, this industry doesn't work without the incentives.
So we just yeah, that's exactly right. So we just did a video, put it out yesterday, and we were talking about. We actually pulled some data from Car Edge, and it showed that luxury vehicles now, on average, had a day supply of across all the brands. Now we know Lexus is doing a lot better.
Yes.
Audi is horrible.
Yes.
But if you average all the luxury brands, we have a day supply of 200 days of inventory right now sitting on lots. And what we went back and looked at is that before a big downturn, what you have is you have the luxury brands that will tend to sit a lot longer than any of the other brands in the market. And it's showing that people who have money are not spending it. This is what I tried to get to a little bit earlier. And now I feel like the price points of these big manufacturers, these three manufacturers that we're specifically talking about, have moved into the luxury price point where you're having trucks that are $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. And do you feel like they're going to suffer more in this environment than they typically would because of the price points that they've now moved themselves into, where they're not really middle class? Like an F-150 Lariat that's $85,000 right now, that's not a middle class truck anymore. It used to be, and the middle class could afford that, but they can't do it now. So do you feel like we can now put these big truck manufacturers closer to how they're going to react with the luxury brands, or do they still fall in that same range as like a Toyota or a Honda now?
Well, I think most of them have looked at it over the past few years and decided that they wanted to become luxury brands, okay, and that they wanted to price their vehicles accordingly. The problem with that, as we are experiencing now, as uncertainty grows, the people that actually have the wherewithal to be able to buy these vehicles at these luxury prices are acting more conservatively than they would have in the past. When there is an uncertainty, they seem to spend their money. When there is uncertainty, they think about spending their money and then oftentimes choose not to. And so ultimately, we're going to continue to see a slowdown in some of these luxury priced vehicle sales. There's only so much money that people are going to be willing to spend. And so I think all the manufacturers who have tried to go way more upscale are going to rue the day that they made the decision to do that. Stellantis is the perfect example of that, where today they are willing to admit that they priced themselves out of their customers' reach, all because of what was going on during the pandemic when they thought they could get away with it. And they could for a short period of time. But they have finally admitted that, yeah, we raised the prices too much. We tried to go too upscale. And so it's coming back to haunt them. And I think as the uncertainty persists, the haunting will get worse in the sense that fewer and fewer of these well-heeled customers are going to go out and be buying products. That's why everybody is suspecting that auto sales will decline dramatically in the second half of the year.
And the problem too, even with Stellantis, even with them recognizing that there is a problem, it takes time to correct. I mean, it takes a long time for them to do R&D on new products. Even if they want to get out and throw out a $35,000 or $40,000 truck, it's going to take them time to be able to develop this. And we're probably still 2-3 years away from getting something like that. Yeah. So even if they want to change right now, they can't do it right this minute. And I want to pull this comment up. Thomas is saying, but if GM starts building their vehicles in the U.S., this dip in net profit is only a temporary situation. Here's the problem. U.S. labor and building plants out and getting assembly here in the U.S., one, takes a lot of time, and two, takes so much more money than what they're already paying. So even though they could bring plants into the U.S., start assembly here in the U.S., at the end of the day, on their bottom line on the sheet, even if they're paying tariffs for Mexican labor and for Mexican assembly, it might end up being still a net negative for them to bring the assembly here into the U.S. It might even cost them less with the tariff to do the assembly down in Mexico. So, yes, maybe it's a temporary situation that their profits dip because of tariffs, but then their profits are going to dip because of labor, because of plant build out, because of assembly, and so much more. There's more red tape in the U.S. than they have to deal with anywhere else.
It's real simple. Okay, the reason that assembly has moved to like Mexico, Korea, China, is because of the cost of labor. I mean, let's get real here. The only reason to build facilities to manufacture the vehicles there is because it's cheaper. It's cheaper than building them here. And so, because labor in the United States is more expensive than it is in China, or it is in Korea, or it is in Mexico. So, what these manufacturers are looking at, it's real simple. Is it cheaper to pay a 25% import tax, or would it be cheaper to move the manufacturing here? Either way, their costs are going up. And what they have to figure out is, if we pay the tariffs, it's costing us about 4% on our net profit. If we move production to the United States, will that number still be a 4% decline in net profit, or will it only be a 3% decline in net profit because of the cost of labor to build it here? So that's what they're looking at, and that's what the decision is going to be based on. It entirely will be based on how's it going to be cheapest for us to do it, which is why many times manufacturers don't care about recalls, because they figure it's cheaper to do the recall work ultimately than it is to correct the issue, so that they don't have to do the recall work, to correct the issue at production. They've done the cost analysis. They know.
Yeah, and so now we've talked about like the upper end of the market, but also the lower end of the market is getting hit in the face right now too. I can tell you, I'm the lower end of the market. I've got cars that are $5,000 and under, and I can tell you, last month we were very slow, and we just broke even. We probably lost a little bit of money.
Yes,
and that's very rare for us. So typically we'll do on average like 60, 65 cars a month, and we did 41 cars last month. So it's it hasn't been looking good for our dealership, and I mean, we've been able to go and actually buy more inventory. Last month we had more inventory than we typically have in a June, because I mean, a lot of these car dealers are going through the same thing that we're going through. So prices at auction were down last month, at least the stuff that I was buying, and I was able to go and buy pretty much whatever I wanted to. We put it on our lot, and we had some $2,500 cars, and they still weren't moving. My wife is correcting me in the chat here. She said we sold 43 cars, not 41, but still not great. And this month is also looking like hopefully break even kind of month. And I can tell you, like, what, 5-6 years ago, if we were just breaking even, I was stressed out. I was pacing. I was trying to figure out how to fix things. And right now, I'm considering break even a win. That's how bad the market looks to me, and from the used car standpoint.
And do you attribute that to the rising costs of things associated with owning a car? The cost of maintenance has gone up. The cost to insure the vehicle has gone up. The cost of fuel is somewhat neutral at the moment. The cost to borrow money has gone up. The cost of most goods has gone up. We're seeing inflation going up again. So do you attribute the slowdown in sales to the fact that people are trying harder and harder than ever to figure out how to stretch their income to be able to cover all the things they need to cover?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily attributed to the cost of owning a vehicle going up, because most of my consumers, they're getting into a car or one of our cars because they just need A to B transportation. They need it right now.
Yeah.
That's my consumer. So I feel like the pullback in my consumer is because of everything else costing so much money, like their housing, their groceries, everything that's associated with just living in the U.S., where they have less disposable income. And one thing I said the other day in the video that we recorded, talking about things that you can look at in the car market to see that potentially there's a downturn that's coming, is that the top end of the market, they hold on their money, but the lower end of the market, the people that are broke, well, they get broker, and broke people can usually scratch up $2,500, $3,000 from somewhere to be able to buy a vehicle from us. But when those people that are broke get even broker, well, then they get into survival mode. So that money that gets scraped up that they can try to find, it's going to be to feed their families, because okay, maybe there was a layoff situation in a small business because a small business is not doing well, so now they have to take a pay cut. I just know for a fact that a lot of the dealers that are a little bit higher up than I am as far as the range that they sell, they've been telling they're dead. Like they can't move cars, and some of them are. I mean, they're buy here, pay here dealers. So even in those aspects, like, I mean, that's people that can't even scrape together $950 to put a down payment on one of these cars, and then grace themselves with paying 25% interest on the car.
That's a sad commentary, and that's a scary commentary, because if the people at the low end just can't afford to do anything anymore, and the people at the top end are choosing not to do anything, that would seem to indicate to me that the economy is looking at a turn for the worse and not a turn for the better. If you're seeing it at your end of the car market, which is, the low end of the car, if you're seeing it there, how's that bode for the rest of the economy? Things that what is going to happen next month when it's back to school time and people are supposed to go buy school supplies and clothes for their kids and this and that? I mean, there's just not, there appears to be not enough money to go around for average people today in order to have an average life, it seems to me. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
Well, the thing that I was almost wondering about is, okay, so I've been a car dealer for 14 years now. When I got into it, it was 2011.
Okay.
So the only real downturn that we experienced was right at the beginning of COVID, but that didn't last very long, right? Because money was pumped in, and then we didn't have cars, and then people were paying crazy. So I don't really even consider that, because it was maybe 2 or 3 months of a really scary time for the car business.
Yes.
But then it was off to the races.
Yes.
So I've never really experienced any kind of downturn, not even really a recession, not anything where people are holding on to their money. So I go to like some of the old timers that I hang around with at the auction, or I go to my grandfather who was a car dealer, and like ask him, okay, well, if we do have this slowdown where people are holding on to money, well, what happens to a car dealer like me? What am I supposed to expect? And my grandfather was like, well, I mean, you just keep on kind of chugging along, and I mean, you'll get hits here and it'll be slower there, but really people just don't spend money. And that's really the only thing that he could say about it, is like, yeah, it's going to be slow. People they just don't spend money. I mean, they might have money, but they're just not spending it.
Yes. And listen, you weren't in business during the Great Recession. I was in the car business then, and it wasn't as if people didn't have money. It's just everything went to hell in a handbasket in like 3.5 minutes. And, and then fear sets in, and herd mentality sets in, and everything at a certain point can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If all you're seeing in the media and hearing on the news is that the economy's bad and things are bad and people don't have any money and people are upside down on their homes, well, then guess what? People start buying into that, and fear takes over, and they stop spending money. I mean, I remember talking to customers and saying, the economy would be just great if we all just keep spending money. But if we stop spending money, that's when this thing grinds to a halt. And
did it work? Is that how you made sales when everyone was trying not to spend money? You told them, no, you just need to spend money and everything will be okay.
Well, because I come up with these stupid theories, but there's some validity to these stupid theories. If people don't know any better, they just keep spending their money, then at least locally everything will be fine. As it turns out, the messaging was much stronger. The national messaging as to what the hell was going on in the country was much stronger than my little local messaging at Acura North Scottsdale. And so, sales dropped off to nothing. And it was like, man, we all hope we just have enough cash in the bank to survive this nonsense until it turns around. And, it took years back then, years. So,
and that's the thing I've never seen, and I almost think I want to think like glass half full, is that okay, if we do go through this and people stop spending money, then we have people that trade down, and maybe they trade down right into my car, so I inherit a lot of the middle tier buyers, which is a much bigger piece of the pie than the pie that I deal with. But if no one's spending money and no one's spending money and no one's spending money, then it almost doesn't matter, because that pie that I'm inheriting might go from here to here anyway. And in which case I'm dealing with fewer consumers than I even have access to right now.
If fear is a troubling thing when the vast majority of the population becomes fearful. And literally, I mean, it was as if somebody turned off the spigot. Okay. It was just like we had customers. Then we had customers that were, kind of sort of on the fence and hadn't really had to think about it. And then, shit, we don't have any customers. And nobody was willing to spend any money. And you just had, I mean, I know I lost my job during that, because, well, it's your fault sales fell in half. No, it had nothing to do with me.
Yeah. And there's just going to be layoffs everywhere when this happens too. Yeah.
And it literally, how many years did it take to come back from that to where we got into boom times again, 4 or 5 years.
It took 2 years for the housing market to bottom after 2008.
Okay, so that gives you, and I'm not saying we're anywhere near that today, but if the amount of uncertainty continues or grows, and if everyday people really can't, they can't afford to see the increase in rent, they can't afford, if they suddenly have to pay back student loan, whatever it is. I mean, there's more things that are drawing cash away from them than there had been. Then, yeah, I would think that could have a downward economic impact as to the growth of the economy. And I don't know, everything I've read and seen, the GDP's down. It apparently it's not, at the moment, it's not trending in the right direction.
Yeah,
I think is the most politically correct way to say it.
But politically, they might just change the definition later anyway, so it won't matter.
They might.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. I had a good show today. Ray, thank you for being here. Everyone that's watching in the comments, thank you for being here. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things. Ray, see you next week, buddy.
My plan is, God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be back here again next Tuesday if you'll have me.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.